Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spawncast episode 18. 18. Apparently I've been wrong for a little while, but I have now corrected myself and just disregard any previous times where I said 15 or 14 or 15 over and over and over again. And we're only 5 minutes late. Nate reminded me that in college, if your professor wasn't there 10 minutes in, you were allowed to leave. So we made the cutoff. We're here. Everyone has to stay.
That's right. You cannot leave, and if you leave, you do not get credit for attendance. So if you want your absence to be used against you on your report card later this year, you best stay in your seat and pay attention.
Okay. Well, we're all here now. It's okay. We're good. I did post an update for the Spawncast stuff that was over on the Spawnwave channel. It's what took me a little longer and make sure that was up and running and everything was good. But we are here. Thanks everyone for stopping in. Let's see, you got Steve and Joshy in the chat there. Brian's over there. Shout out to everyone stopping in. Of course, shout out as well to the members over on the Spawncast Network, supporting the show, all the different shows that are happening right now. We appreciate you guys. A lot of stuff happening over there. So tonight we also have a bunch of stuff to go over, including Helldivers 2, which Nate continues to shake his head at. And I want to understand why, so I'm going to quiz him on it tonight. We have the Xbox financials, which I think paint a very interesting picture, actually, as to Microsoft's strategy going forward. Fallout absolutely took over while we were gone, Nate. It was mayhem. He still hasn't watched it, by the way, but it's okay. It's all right. We forgive him. Had Perfect Dark pop up in the news as well, which I think is it's about time we started at least seeing this pop up here and there. So one aspect actually is welcomed, I would say, for it. BlizzCon got pretty much canceled for this year, and Meta and Xbox showed up in the same video, which is incredible stuff. How are you doing tonight, though, Nate?
I am quite cold. We've been getting a frost here the last couple of days, and I just want that nice spring weather that we're not getting. Yeah, we had a frost last night. We're in a frost warning for tonight into tomorrow morning. And I mean, we're on the brink of May, and I want to start planting the garden and stuff, and can't until the frost is gone.
A frost warning?
Yes, because I think our low tonight is 35.
35?
Yeah.
Jeez.
This is ridiculous. It's supposed to be spring.
You know what I think of whenever I hear frost? Like, it's so funny. It's frost warning. I think of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. I feel like that's the only time I've ever seen that character. Am I wrong? What else? They were in Mortal Kombat. They're in, I think, the recent one, I think. But I always think of that for some reason. Like Deadly Alliance, I remember them specifically popping up in there. I don't know why I think of that.
That's when Mortal Kombat got a little too heavy on the palette swaps of Scorpion and Sub-Zero, where they're like, we need another Sub-Zero type character, but we can't go that cold. Let's do Frost. He's just cold enough to make it.
Frost, yeah, that's it's not that cold here. I what is cold. It's 47 here. It's not too bad.
Okay, so you're solid 10 degrees warmer than me.
I think it's supposed to start being just 80 in the Northeast soon. Just 80 over the next 4 or 5 days or something crazy. So the changing weather is what gets people.
I think we're getting into like the high to low 70s. I think Monday we're hitting a high of 77, which will feel amazing.
It's that's the problem, is the changing weather. It's like it's 30 right now, and in 12 hours it's going to be 80. And it's like, what? How is that? And it just messes with people's allergies and stuff. So
yeah, a lot of people are going to be having head colds and sinus infections and everything in the next few days.
I used to have those when I was younger, so I guess I just grew out of that. I don't know. I used to have to take Claritin all the time.
Or you're just not outside as much as you used to be.
It could be that too. I feel like I was outside more when I was a kid.
I feel like I was. Bike rides and sports. You're probably already like.
You used to have to walk to outside your friend's house.
Yeah, I think once the weather got warm, we were riding bikes, going to friends' house, playing outside, playing wiffle ball, muckle, and that's on top of playing spring soccer and baseball.
What did you say?
Muckle? You never played muckle?
That's the Harry Potter. You guys, what are you doing over there?
Oh, it's when you had the football and you held the football and everyone else tried to tackle you, and if you don't want to get
tackled, that was called something completely different in the Northeast where I'm from, and it's something that I can't say anymore.
We called it muckle.
We called it something way worse. Those were the 90s. Those are the 90s right there, okay? The 90s speaking.
Okay.
That was
Well,
different
then.
times. But that's good stuff. But let me go over here. This was Zoop says Phil didn't expect Fallout Prime to boost the game since Halo show flopped. Elder Scrolls 1, 2, Fallout 1, Fallout 2 was 2 years. Elder Scrolls 5 to 6 and Fallout 4 to 5 are 18 plus each. Fallout 5's forever away. That's all I'll tell you now. I guess it's gonna be a long time. A long time before we see that thing come out. Psh. They at least got an update out for Fallout though, so there's something there. Something. I'm gonna start with, what do we want to start with tonight, Nate? Did you look at the? I do want to bring it. Did you look at the golden sale for Xbox yet?
I did not.
I was gonna give some. I was gonna give a suggestion. Tell you what, I'll drop a link. You can take a little bit, figure out what your suggestion is. Go through it. Here's the nice thing about this: there's backwards compatibility for the Xbox Series, all the way back to the original Xbox. So you might be surprised what's in there. So I went ahead and put it in the notes. We'll save that for a little later. We're gonna give you guys a fun recommendation for Xbox's golden sale that's going on right now, which is actually pretty good. So let's, we'll start with Nate. We're going to start with the thumbnail. I hear sometimes they're like, wait, it's not right away. We're going to start with Helldivers 2. How about that? Okay. We're going to go to that immediately. So this came from Xbox Era Special Nick, or as Sean calls him, Shesh Paul Nick. Actually brought up the idea that there are early talks around Helldivers 2 coming to Xbox, at least the Xbox platform. And I saw this and I thought that's a tough one to cover, because there's no, like, you're not going to be wrong when it comes to early talks about something, because early talks happen about things all the time. Things that people probably would never expect to be a thing were almost a thing at one point in time, and it just didn't pan out. And I kind of think that's what we're hearing about here. But we're also in different times when it comes to the way these platform holders treat each other and probably view each other in general. The fact that Helldivers 2 is a game that Sony published, had in development alongside Arrowhead for, what was this thing, like 8 years? Something like 7 or 8 years. It was a long time. And then launched it on PC day one. That's a bit different than we'd expect, say, 5 or 6 years ago from Sony. So I don't necessarily disregard this completely like you may, Nate. But what did you think of this when you heard it? Early talks, Helldivers 2, Xbox.
I think when I saw it and I heard it, it said very, very, very early talks about this. And my first question would be, who are the early talks between? Because that's not how a port of a game happens. If you want to port a game, if you're Arrow and you want to port a game to Xbox, you port the game. So unless these are discussions between Arrow and Sony to make a multi-platform port a possibility, that's the only way a discussion is really taking place. Because as we know, Helldivers is a PlayStation IP. Sony owns that IP, and Arrow is the developer. So if those are the discussions taking place, you have to wonder, to what extent were those discussions? Was it simply just the developer expressing a thought of, hey, we have a lot of players on PlayStation and PC. We could get more players if we brought this to Xbox. And that was just a passing thought that they had shared with Sony as the IP owner and publisher. And Sony said, yeah or no. But beyond that, I'm not sure where these discussions would be really taking place. And that just gives me a little bit of pause as to what exactly are we dealing with here. And we haven't seen any other Sony IP beyond MLB The Show come to the Xbox. And that's only because MLB The Show it's forced. There is essentially MLB, the organization, is dictating that MLB The Show has to be a multi-platform release. Otherwise, there's really little reason to expect Mike or Sony to be bringing any of their IP to the Xbox ecosystem. Now, you could make the argument that something like Helldivers 2 would definitely benefit from increasing that player pool, But I just wonder who exactly is having these preliminary discussions to bring Helldivers 2 to the Xbox.
You know what's so interesting about this one in particular, Nate? The Typically online when you see this kind of stuff, we know how it is on social media where you'll have basically fanboys battling it out in the trenches on places like Twitter and that sort of thing, right? But Helldivers 2 seems to have a different reaction to this idea where people who are playing it actually seem for this. Like they're like, "Oh yeah, cool. That'll work." I mean, there's an entire petition, and I know it's funny. Change.org doesn't really do much, even though it's called change.org, right? Uh, there was a petition that was put up about this in February, and it amassed over 110,000 signatures for it. Like the idea of bringing Helldivers 2 to the Xbox, which surprised me. I didn't think you'd be able to get that many people on board to go there and do that. But it's I don't know. I do wonder how Sony views Helldivers 2, and now they're starting because they have their own data when it comes to Destiny. Destiny 2 is extremely popular on the Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like they look at those numbers and they do wonder. It's like, would it really kill us if we moved Helldivers 2 to the, would that hurt us that bad? Because I don't know if Helldivers 2 is a game that is necessarily selling PlayStations like that, like at a clip like you would see Spider-Man or you'd see God of War. Those are the games that I look at and go, okay, those are selling PlayStations. I feel like Helldivers 2 is a game that's held up quite a bit by the PC side as well. With the PlayStation. So I do wonder if Sony did that, I don't know if it would hurt their console sales that much.
No.
To the point, like I think they'd benefit more actually from doing that with on a platform with the Xbox that is very much geared towards multiplayer and live service titles.
Yeah, that's the thing, is I don't think Helldivers 2 in any way is a significant hardware mover. It's more of that game that just helps your ecosystem. And as you had mentioned, the PC market is definitely a sizable portion of active players with this particular title. I wouldn't be shocked if the split is somewhere in the area of 50-50, if not 60-40 in favor of PC with this particular release. But by bringing it to the Xbox, you're just looking to really increase that player pool, allow more people to play the game, more people you can sell the game to, because Helldivers 2 isn't exactly a title that is heavy with microtransactions. The investment really is to buy the game up front. But it all comes down to how Sony wants to approach this IP. And the IP isn't something that has a lot of value in terms of name recognition. This isn't something that you're immediately associating to the PlayStation brand, as the majority of Helldivers 2 players likely never played Helldivers 1. So a lot of new people came to the game. But on the flip side to that, given the game's booming success, you have to wonder, is it truly beneficial to bring it to the Xbox, or have you more or less created a game that you're selling to the current PlayStation 5 install base plus that PC base because you're bringing them now into that PlayStation ecosystem via a multi-platform release between Sony with the PlayStation and the PC, where you're just going to expand as people adopt and buy PlayStation 5s, or people who already own a PlayStation 5 buying the game, because you've essentially given the platform its, for lack of a better term, must-play online multiplayer game, which when we look in the past of Sony games, they really haven't had their own exclusive multiplayer game that had a sizable committed player base. They tried a lot during the PlayStation 3 with titles like Starhawk and Warhawk, and they never really took off. You had the Uncharted games that had online multiplayer, but they were always dwarfed in comparison to something like Call of Duty, whereas the 360 generation, when you look at what Microsoft was outputting with Gears of War, Halo, they had that multiplayer focus, and that's where a lot of people chose the Xbox when it came to titles like Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. They've already were committed to Xbox Live. Their friends were playing online on that platform. Now Sony finally has that multiplayer game for their brand, and maybe they want to hold it so when Helldivers 3 eventually comes out, it has a little more brand recognition for them. But again, if there were discussions being had of bringing the game to Xbox, it must be from the developer expressing it to Sony, and Sony's going to have that final say, and they'll have to compound that data and really evaluate whether or not it's beneficial for them to bring it to the Xbox, what type of sales are they potentially looking at here? Again, because the game isn't microtransaction heavy, they need to essentially pay for that port project by having individuals buy the game at the retail price. Is there going to be enough interest? Because there's a lot of gamers on PC now, and if you have a PC, you can play Microsoft games, you can play Sony games. What piece of pie is the Xbox install base really going to offer Sony by bringing something like Helldivers 2 over? Like, there's definitely going to be a percentage of Xbox gamers who would buy the game, but there has to be a sizable percentage of Xbox owners who also have a capable PC or also own a PlayStation 5.
I also wonder because by the time they'd be ready to get this game, even a port of Helldivers 2, even if they start early talks now, I mean, it could be a year or two before they get that even all finalized and out. I mean, we might be talking about Microsoft's next system by then, with the way they're apparently going and trending right now, with a 2026 target being rumored so much. Maybe Sony thinks about that as, well, we can move it there, and Microsoft went heavy into the cloud, so we'll offer it there and it'll be available on your TV with just a controller. You don't need an Xbox. We'll port it over and it'll mostly be taking advantage of the cloud stuff even. So that's the thing is, I feel like we're at this interesting crossroads with Microsoft as it is, which we're going to get into their financials here, and I think that's actually spelling a lot of what kind of their direction is right now. But we don't know what Microsoft's going to look. We don't know what gaming's going to look like in 5 or 6 years at this rate. And I kind of think Helldivers 2 for Sony, I wouldn't be shocked if that's a 10-year project. Like the way it's going.
I mean, it could easily become one of those 10-year games as a service projects for them, as long as the install base and the player base remains very active with the game. And that's the thing. If we're talking 5, 6, 10 years into the future, could Helldivers 2 eventually go to a Nintendo platform or the Xbox platform? Yes, because this is going to be something that Sony's going to continue to come back to and revisit and adjust their strategy with. If there's a way to make money with this project, then they will do so. And we know, based on Sony's own revenue streams, how razor thin their profit margin is, especially in the gaming sector. So if they view this as a way to increase that revenue and profitability, it's something they will consider if they are brought to that point. But right now in 2024, I don't think Sony is quite there yet. And you could also expand this to how Sony has approached their releases on PC. This was the first day and date PlayStation game to release on PC, and huge success for them. But when you look at their single player focused games, they continue to implement that 6-month to 12-month later strategy. And that has definitely benefited them, because it gives you incentive to buy the PlayStation 5 if you want to play the games first. But now if they are to adjust that in any way, and they bring more and more games to day and date on PC, they start to erode that reason to invest in a PlayStation. So I don't think Sony's ready to go that route right now. But who knows what 2030 could bring. The gaming industry is definitely at a crossroads right now, and all the companies are beginning to adapt and adjust their strategies. But Sony still seems as though they are very committed to the PlayStation brand, and I just have a hard time seeing them bring Helldivers 2 to the Xbox, at least in the immediate future. But 5, 10 years down the line, it's impossible to predict at this point.
Yeah, it's either way. It'll be a bit, if these are early talks, as were mentioned by Special Nick on Xbox Era, they could just fall through and never amounts to anything anyway. But that would be an interesting announcement if we came across that day where Sony shows up and is like, yeah, it's going to Xbox. But hey, otherwise, Microsoft will keep piling their live service stuff on Sony's platform, and as we're about to take a look, make a lot of money. So let's actually move over to the Xbox financials. First, though, I do want to recognize some of the producers over on the Spawncast Network. I'm going to start with John O, Joshua Butts, Mr. Joby, The Game Orb, Justin Maverick, and then Trent A. Shout out to them making all this possible. Appreciate them. Of course, you can sign up over on the spawncastnetwork.com. And Nate, we did have the Xbox financials come out. Okay, and this is for their most recent Q3 earning report, right? So looking at this, they're going to be comparing Xbox as it is now versus Xbox a year ago. Xbox now has Activision Blizzard. Xbox back then did not. So it's a very important difference there technically, because their gaming revenue is up 51% year over year, which is not shocking, right? When you have Activision Blizzard, you have Call of Duty rolling along. Their Xbox content and services are up 62%. Again, kind of the same thing there. Their Xbox hardware, though, the revenue is down 31%. That is the steepest decline since the launch of the Xbox Series X and S. So software way up in terms of revenue. Like, they're making good money there. In fact, some were going through the numbers and estimating that this year that they're in now, this fiscal year, they could end up over $20 billion in terms of their gaming revenue, which would place them pretty close. They're getting close to Sony then, if that's the case, and well above Nintendo in terms of gross revenue, in terms of profitability. Technically, Nintendo is first place for that, which it seems weird, right? Because of the disparity in gross revenue, but that we know how Nintendo operates with that kind of thing. But Microsoft making a pretty big push then if they cross the 20 billion mark, despite their hardware revenue just being down in general. There's no other way to really say it. It's just down 31%. That's from a year ago where the hardware was already down, like I think double digits. So it's less hardware, but more software revenue.
I think of the two, I don't see how anyone can really look at the hardware figure and be surprised. Because when you look at the last quarter, what did Microsoft have? The ongoing issue with Xbox this entire generation is that they haven't had any momentum in terms of software releases. They haven't provided an incentive for individuals to go out and buy the hardware. And that continues to plague the platform. And I believe it was in the last episode, or maybe the episode before, that we essentially had the agreement of this generation is lost for Microsoft. What they need to focus on right now is bringing out quality games for the rest of this generation and building up a little bit of goodwill among their player base so that you have confidence going into the next gen that the acquisitions that they have made and that the studios that they have opened over the course of the last decade have the talent and can put out a quality game. So when Fable comes out, and let's say Fable is fantastic, you have that confidence that when they do Fable 2, that it's going to be a fantastic entry to that franchise. And it gives you reason to be excited about the next generation of Xbox where you would get that sequel. Or you have the Coalition with Gears of War 6. You have confidence that they can make another great Gears game, or that you have Perfect Dark and, just other projects. You have to have confidence going into what Microsoft has planned for the future. They just haven't had any true momentum since this platform launched in 2020. And it really started and delayed a full year. The game needed it. The game has since really revitalized itself in terms of multiplayer features, but the damage was done. You launched limp, and you have not been able to recover from that moment. But we do see promise coming in 2024 in terms of software. Not necessarily enough to really see a boom in terms of hardware interest. They're not going to turn around this generation. They're very likely to cap off the generation anywhere from 40 to maybe 50 million pieces of hardware sold. And you can make a debate that that isn't an outright disaster, especially when you and I grew up in a generation where the original Xbox sold just north of 20 million. Which, if happened today, people would say that's a just outright bomb. But back then, that was enough for a success for some companies. So if they can finish this generation, let's say at 45 million systems, it's not the best. It's less than the Xbox One. But it's ideally something that they can look at and reflect and say, okay, how do we have to approach our hardware moving forward? Because this generation is lost. They have to build goodwill between Game Pass and the software that they have been able to acquire through the mergers and acquisitions, and just give confidence that the Xbox ecosystem can generate exciting software moving forward.
I do wonder if I feel like that Xbox 360 generation have created certain expectations around hardware sales due to how much that system just failed in general, how many got replaced, and if Microsoft counted those as sales, because I feel like they did. So if there's a red ring and you ship it in, I think they counted it as a sale.
Yeah, they definitely counted those as a sale, because how many people went to a store, traded in the red ring of death, bought a brand new Xbox? Or you even have to factor in the second wind that the 360 received with the advent of the Kinect. The Kinect was a huge deal when it first came onto the scene. It became more casual appealing to people, And you also have to consider when Call of Duty 4 really hit the market, that pushed a lot of hardware for both
It did.
Microsoft and Sony, and we're not having that type of release anymore. So, I mean, I don't want to say let's subtract 15 or 20 million
I
from
think
the
the
Xbox
Xbox One
360.
I think the Xbox One is pretty reflective as to the how many people or the Xbox audience, I guess, in terms of like just raw numbers. I think that between 50 and 60 million is about right.
Which, I mean, it really isn't a bad figure. And depending on what Microsoft's internal expectations are from hardware, let's say if they went into this generation saying, let's sell 50 million pieces of hardware, and they hit that, the problem then becomes commentators, armchair analysts saying, oh, this is a bomb.
That's just console though, because they're obviously since what Quantum Break when they really made the move, they've been taking advantage of PC as well. And I mean, Microsoft
Well,
makes Windows, so what do they care?
and that's the other thing I think people don't really factor into the conversation of declining hardware sales from Microsoft is I still don't believe Microsoft fully evaluated the impact going day and date on PC would have on Xbox hardware sales because they provided less incentive for individuals to buy an Xbox by going day and date. A lot of people have capable PCs. If you have a capable PC, what is the reason for you to buy an Xbox? There is none, especially with Square Enix and Atlas and other Japanese companies really embracing the PC sector stronger now than they had in the past. So if you erase that reason to buy an Xbox by going day and date, you potentially could have lost the area of several million consumers. And I don't think they really weighed that when they made that decision.
Yeah. The thing I really miss about that 360 generation is I feel like there was more of a competitive drive, a competitive spirit between Microsoft and Sony, whereas now they're
Mhm.
don't see they seem like they're very parallel to each other. Like they seem very cordial and I don't know. Back then, I like seeing these companies like fight it out almost literally for our dollars, and unfortunately, they don't do that as much anymore. But
Mhm.
it also might be just because they're taking such different strategies at this time. But that's looking at this though, I do wonder Microsoft's still making a bunch of money just because of how much they're selling in terms of software utilizing PC, now PlayStation, and then also
Mhm.
Xbox and streaming. Satya Nadella seemed pretty happy with these numbers, which I will tell you now, Nate, it makes me think that more games are coming beyond the 4 they've announced. I think there's based on what they've said previously, and I think Sea of Thieves is going to see pretty big success on the PlayStation. Like, I don't think that's going to be a question at this point. I think it's going to do very, very well there. I kind of feel like other live service titles are coming. I still don't think Halo will go because that does feel so tied to Xbox, but Gears of War was on the PS3 almost. Like it was so close. Like they had a build and everything. I mean, we saw MVG even ran it on his channel.
But
I don't know. I don't
at the
know.
time, I don't believe Microsoft owned the Gears of War IP. It was still
I guess
Epic.
that's true. Yeah.
So that, that kind of muddies that a little bit. But yes, more Microsoft games will be going multi-platform, especially with the acquisition of Activision Blizzard. You're not going to keep a game like Spyro an exclusive to the Xbox brand. That's naturally going to go multi-platform because that's going to give it the largest reach. I think the bigger conversation isn't so much what Microsoft owned studios' games are going to go multi platform. I think it's more which Xbox game studio games are going to go multi platform because whether a Bethesda game or an Activision Blizzard game goes multi platform, I think people already have in the back of their mind an expectation that established franchises will always have that very real possibility of going multi platform, especially when you look at the Activision Blizzard catalog. You're not going to keep Tony Hawk or Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Diablo, and so forth exclusive to the platform. Those are naturally going to be multi platform games, and they're going to generate a lot of money. Call of Duty as well. So, those types of games going multi platform are all expected. The bigger question are going to be will Microsoft dabble into the idea of bringing a Fable, a Perfect Dark, a Vowed, things like that multi platform? And right now, I don't see Microsoft doing that. They need to keep some identity to the Xbox brand, and they need to keep those types of core exclusives to the brand as well as bring in a PC. Now, if a game like Microsoft Flight Simulator went to PlayStation 5, I wouldn't be
Mm.
surprised by that. that's
What
that's
what
not
about
really something that's going to generate a lot of interest to buy an Xbox. So it's a live service game essentially. Make it go multi-platform. Bring in
what
extra
about
revenue.
so we're talking about Rare with Sea of Thieves. What if Everwild comes out and that's like a somewhat live service multiplayer style game is how it ends up? Do
Make
you think
it,
that's
yeah.
something that could be on PlayStation as well, same day?
If it's a live service style game, I think that could
Yeah.
go PlayStation easily, or even bring it to the Switch or the Switch successor. If that's a good platform for the
I
game,
think things
Microsoft
will be
will
very
evaluate
interesting for
that.
Microsoft when that next Nintendo system comes out and it is more capable as we're expecting. I kind of feel like Microsoft's going to take advantage of that. Okay, they're going to put a lot of stuff I feel like on that system. Like they're going to get stuff in
Yes.
front of that audience quite a bit because
Mhm.
they don't see Nintendo as direct competitor to them at this time. Like you mentioned Spyro, that thing's on Nintendo's next system. If they can get it on the current Switch, they will. Like I feel like they're all over
Yeah,
that.
that would be a day one thing. And I mean, that's where Microsoft can evaluate their strategy. They could evaluate it to the point of saying, you know what, Spyro is going to be on Xbox, PC, and Switch too. But we're not going to give it to PlayStation because we don't think the user base is there for it. And that's going to be that's really going to be the interesting thing to watch here.
Oh.
And as we can see, Microsoft seems to be really adjusting their strategy as things are happening in real time. So I don't think anyone really has a full finger on the pulse of exactly what Microsoft is planning in terms of their multi-platform approach moving into the future because they're adapting based on the data they're collecting and the sales reception that they are getting from this initial 4 games. And they're going to make adjustments. They're going to refine the games they're going to bring based on how these games are performing. So it's impossible to say the exact direction Microsoft is going to take with the multi-platform approach beyond we will see more games going multi-platform. It's just going to be a question of which ones and where will they go.
I think that is the path forward for certain IPs being resurrected. Like Banjo, I think if you have the Switch open to you for that, like if you're Microsoft, you could
Yes.
greenlight that a lot easier and be like, well, I mean, there's 100 some
Hmm.
odd million people that would maybe buy this game. Yes, we can greenlight this thing now. And then
Hmm.
we're also going to put it on Game Pass. That's our benefit. Whereas on the Switch, you got to buy it
Yes.
for 50, $60 or whatever.
And that's the exact type of approach, if I were Microsoft, how I would do it. Hey, we want to make a new Banjo game. Let's bring it to the Switch successor and the car and Xbox Series S and Series X, because we know it's going to have a lot of interest from that Nintendo fan base, but we'll also have interest on the PC and Xbox user base, and we can easily greenlight this project because we will make back that budget and we will make a very profitable game in return. And that's how Microsoft should be approaching these multi-platform discussions when it comes to certain releases. And I mean, I see a lot of people saying, well, why would I, as a consumer, want to see this? Because that means third parties won't really commit resources and such to various ports to bring games to the Xbox. That's a problem Microsoft has to figure out, not the consumer. Because if Microsoft is viewing this strictly from a revenue standpoint, the Xbox as a brand is going to have more money coming in than they would ever have had keeping these games exclusive and focusing purely on the Xbox as a system. By expanding, they're making more money. And it's time to start realizing Xbox isn't strictly that box under your TV. Xbox is everywhere. And that's what Microsoft wants Xbox to be. It's Game Pass, it's cloud, it's mobile, it's PC, and it's a dedicated traditional home console with the potential of them making a portable system in the future.
I think people need to be in terms of that aspect. I still look at things like Microsoft, how they've mentioned that they might not be done acquiring
Hmm.
different brands and stuff in the future. Again, we're thinking very, very short term when we talk about some of these exclusives. The thing that I has always it's really stuck in my mind ever since we heard about it, and I do wonder about like the far, far future. I still consider the idea of Microsoft buying Steam to not be that far fetched way down the line. Like that is something like them buying Valve. It sounds weird now because Gabe Newell is kind of been like the roadblock for that. I I mean, he's not going to be. He eventually will retire and move on and do something else or what ride in the
Yeah, I mean,
sunset. That's
10,
something I've
15
considered for a
years.
while. The fact that
Yeah,
we
10,
had those
15 years, he's
documents
going
come
to look to
out
sell.
that said that they sized up Valve. Like they don't know how much Valve is technically worth because Valve is private. So they did a lot of research trying to figure it out. That tells me that they were like, what if we just owned Steam and then we just integrated into Windows? What would that do for us? Like that's something I'm sure that's been drawn up in a whiteboard somewhere. And that's something where you go, well, what does Microsoft do when it comes to third parties? Well, then they just own Steam. So it's like, well, what do you mean? They just own it. So that's something I've considered and thought about a bit. And I do wonder if that's something we'll ever talk about maybe 10 years from now. We're like, wow, Microsoft really dropped that press release. They bought Valve. So that's always up in the air. I don't, that's just something to keep in mind when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to predict what the future is going to be for any of these companies, what type of acquisitions they could make, or even how they're going to approach things. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea of people really viewing Xbox as the largest video game publisher in the world who happens to release a piece of hardware to correspond to select releases on it, because that's really the direction they're going in. They're becoming a very powerful video game publisher who happens to manufacture a console.
I do hope we see that handheld from them. I just feel like the way we're going with hardware, because people keep bringing it up, like the box itself up for Xbox or PlayStation or even technically Nintendo with their handheld. I do hope we start to move in a direction of it being less and less just about how much shinier we can make images look in the visuals, because I feel like we are already plateauing on that. I hope it comes down to more innovation around just graphics, and I do wonder if that plays into the low powered chip angle where we get these handhelds that just accelerate in terms of their capabilities, and maybe that's sort of the battlefield they're on. Then it's like, okay, this handheld versus that handheld, and we get to a point where it's just these handhelds basically do everything the standard boxes do, and we're basically at 4K then. That's kind of where I hope we get to is that point, because I don't know. I thought about like the PS5 Pro some, and it's like, I understand why people are just not that excited for it at this time when I look around, because man, it's like the PS5. I'm playing Stellar Blade, and that thing is just hugging 60 frames, and I look at it as like, man, it already looks really good. I don't know where else we're going. So
It's not exciting, because we're also not we are seeing leaps that are big, but we went from Super Nintendo to N64. We went from N64 to Dreamcast and PlayStation 2, and even the leap from PlayStation 2 to the original Xbox was quite noticeable. Then we had the advent of the HD era, which was a huge leap, going from PlayStation 2 to Gears of War. And then from Gears of War, we went to like the Xbox One, where you could begin to see those diminishing returns. And now, you've heard a lot of people say it, this generation just feels like an extension of the previous generation, and a large part of that is due to the pro consoles. With the Xbox One X and then the PlayStation 4 Pro giving us that checkerboard 4K and then some improved performance and such, it really made the leap from a Xbox One VCR to a Series X feel a bit smaller than it truly was. And if this is the path gaming is going to continue, is just prettier visuals, it's going to become more and more non-exciting as we get to a new generation, especially when the generations don't feel as though they're introducing new concepts or innovations that really separate themselves from the previous generation. Because I'd say the largest innovation that we've seen this generation is really the utilization of the SSD and minimal loading times, which, while very efficient and beneficial to the experience that we're getting while playing these games, it's also not the most thrilling or exciting thing when you look back at the Xbox 360 and how it innovated with Xbox Live, Xbox Arcade, digital games, achievements, in-game award systems where if you unlocked achievements, you could get an avatar and such. They were innovating in so many different ways back then that we're not seeing in game design or even on a hardware OS. We're not seeing that level of creativity anymore. It feels as though everything is very risk adverse and very safe, and companies just want to give a very, I guess, focus group tested product where everything is just tested, safe, and there's no inherent risk that it's going to, I don't want to say fail, because certain products are failing. It's just not exciting. You're not getting excited for these products anymore.
Gotta get creative. Gotta do something weird. Wait for Nintendo. see what they do. Then we'll do that.
Yeah, I mean, Nintendo
That's the
did
move.
sell us a piece of cardboard, and they said make a
Hey,
VR headset out of it.
gotta do something with those Wii U boxes. There's a lot of them left around. But yeah, that's I mean that went away pretty quick. At least they tried. I'll give them that. Like as much as
They
Nintendo gets
tried.
laughed at for some of their ideas, they'll try some weird stuff. I'm okay with that. It's not my money that I'm burning
Yeah,
trying to
they
develop that stuff.
they tried. I think that's why a lot of people were very excited about Microsoft exploring HoloLens, about a decade ago. Or even when Kinect did come to the market, it was like, wow, this is new. How are we going to interact with games? And Kinect essentially just became the Dance Central piece of hardware for them, unless you want to count something like Milo or that Star Wars game
Oh
that did
gosh.
not resonate with people at all
Let's
because the demo was so fake.
you know what, actually, Nate, while we're on that, let's actually move over. I do want to mention this very quickly because it did come up and it was interesting, and then we got more information. I was like, okay, it's not quite what I was hoping, but maybe in the future. So Meta is opening up their OS, their Horizon OS, for other manufacturers. So basically, people coming in who want to make headsets can now use their OS to get it to the finish line. So you don't have to develop your own storefront or operating system, anything like that. You make the headset, it's in some kind of compliance with the OS, so it loads up fine, and then you can ship the thing. So Meta has kind of moved into the position of trying to be Windows for VR. So like just across the board, that will be the de facto OS, as opposed to Apple, of course, who's very closed off with their systems. And now we're hearing that the Apple Vision Pro is not doing well, which I don't know if that's really shocking to people. It's $3,500 and it's some weird looking thing you walk around with on your face. Again, that seems pretty obvious that they're not going to sell a stupid amount of them or anything. But they did name Xbox as a partner. Unfortunately, we found out later on that this is because they're going to do a Meta Quest Xbox themed headset. So that's fine, I guess. I was kind of hoping that Microsoft may look at this and go, oh, we don't have to make the OS or anything. And we already have integration for Game Pass into VR with the Quest. What if we just made a headset and shipped it and pushed it as the Xbox all-in-one, where you don't need a system like a PlayStation 5 where you need PSVR 2, and you can play some of these VR games, and we're also going to have an Xbox storefront with it. Would people be interested in all-in-one headset from Microsoft 5 or 6 years from now?
Hey, 5 or 6 years from now, as the technology continues to improve and mature, potentially.
I mean,
I
they
know
got it
the
right
Meta.
priced, right?
Yeah, it also need the right price. I mean, the Meta Quest 3 already allows you to play your Game Pass games. And I mean, I've seen the videos, I've read the reviews of it. I don't see the appeal of that particular type of application because I'm going to put a
Mm,
VR headset on to have a virtual movie screen in front of me
yes.
where I'm then holding my Xbox controller to play a game that I have on Game Pass on a headset that can die in, let's say, 90 minutes versus playing on a TV.
So
Where am
let
I
me
exactly that I'm going to use this headset that I'm not going to have access to a television?
let me give you one side of this where it might make sense. Okay, so I have a nephew that really wanted a Quest headset. Recently, the Quest 2 went down to $200. Actually, that's how much it costs now. They discounted it, they marked it down, probably just trying to get rid of the rest of them. So for $200, you get this headset, of course, and now they technically have their own TV, whereas before, as we were when we were younger, there's a shared TV in the living room or something. You don't necessarily have one in your room, and you basically have certain times you can play it. Whereas technically, if you have the headset and you're in a space where you don't have your own personal TV that you always have access to, now you technically have that 100-inch TV in your room, basically, and you just have your stuff streamed to it. I could see that being a case for something that is $200 and not $1,000 or 2,000, because then you're like, why don't you just own a TV? Whereas $200 headset, maybe you ask for it for your birthday or something, when you're younger and you get it. So
But even
that's a
in
case
that
I can
case,
see.
but even in that case, the games are being streamed to it. It's over the cloud, right?
Yeah, they have like cloud streaming for it. Yep.
So you're still running into the issues of the input lag unless cloud
Mhm.
gaming is able to mature significantly and really become a a viable means of playing these games, it just feels as though it's more of a complementary thing. It can never be the focus. It cannot be the primary means of consumption for media. I don't see
Right.
where anyone would choose that avenue to be able to play the game over having a dedicated system and playing on a television. Because
Hmm.
eventually that novelty is going to wear off, even as a little kid. You're going to say, yeah, this was cool. And then what, a month later, it's like the rest of the Christmas gifts you give a kid. It's just sitting in the closet collecting dust.
Yeah, basically. I mean the headset itself, you can still play stuff natively on it. So like I think they wanted it mostly for applications that are on there that probably their friends play in VR. You know how it goes with like the younger kids. The someone in the at school has it and they tell them about it, and then they want it, and then their friends want it, and their friends want it, and it just kind of builds that way. It's how things like Fortnite really exploded with the younger audience because it's
Yeah.
free, it's on your phone, and then but then VR kind of has that same thing, but I don't think it's caught on to that degree
Well, no,
because like it's just
it cost you $600
yeah,
versus a free to play game.
exactly, yeah. So that's the big roadblock, and then obviously VR you have to demo to people for them to understand it. You can't explain VR as much as you want to someone for them to
Hmm.
get that feeling of okay, I see why people are so impressed by this. You can't just be like you put the headset on, you're there. It's like, am I? I don't know. I don't know if that's gonna click with me. So
Yeah, so that's always been the barrier with VR and being able to sell VR. Even, I mean, Microsoft tried to make a big deal about it late last year. Of, oh yeah, Game Pass is coming to MetaQuest 3. That was like dropping a pebble in the ocean. That's how much of an
yeah,
impact and effect that had. It didn't even, the ripple it formed was immediately erased by a wave. It didn't matter. It didn't
no.
drive sales, it didn't drive interest because it's an insignificant thing. It's a nice little complementary feature to those who own a Quest 3, but it's not a reason to go out and buy a Quest to play your Game Pass games via the cloud with a VR headset on your face.
I think
Because you're just,
I think the streaming to TV is a bigger deal. Like the fact that you could have an app on your TV and you sync your controller up.
Mhm.
I think that's a bigger deal than the VR thing. But yeah.
Yeah, that's something I
Yep.
think they should be pushing harder. Get onto more televisions, make that a bigger deal of we are now compatible with every single TV manufacturer, sans Sony, and Game Pass is available right to you. Log into your Xbox account and you have access to your games. Just sync up the controller. And all of a sudden you find yourself in kind of that situation of you have your Xbox Series X, let's say, plugged in your office. You want to play something out in the living room on a bigger TV. I just have to log into my account and I can play the game. Ooh, that's a
It
little
works
more appealing.
it works better than you think too. Like I have it on the Samsung TV out in my living room, and you sync up a controller to TV. It works better than you'd expect. You can still tell it's streaming, but it's not
Right.
terrible. That's what I'll say. It
Yeah.
was RPGs were playable, like Persona 4 Gold, and I just picked that at a Game Pass. It worked fine because it's an RPG. Whereas Forza, I could definitely tell I was
Ugh.
streaming it, is what I'll say. Like the turns and stuff, a little delayed. It
Mhm.
wasn't quite there. But that is convenience. Convenience obviously rules out for a lot of people, and there might be some who are like, "Oh, I just need a controller, and that's it." There you go. So
Mhm. I mean, that's always going to be the obstacle when it comes to that is just being able to play the game in a very, comfortable setting without too much input lagged and cloud technology. It's getting close. It's just not there yet. And I just don't see how cloud and streaming will ever be the primary means of being able to enjoy this level of entertainment. You don't want to have that risk of a data pack loss where all of a sudden your car is spinning out of control because you had that second of input lag, or you're playing WWE 2K and you're not getting the reversals and such because there's just a little bit of lag, so you're always late on countering.
yeah,
Same
that would get
same.
very annoying, and I probably wouldn't play any of those games through that. But again, there's some people probably put up with it. There are probably some people get really, really good at the cloud delay, and it's just incredible stuff to watch. But
Yeah, it'd be
I
a little
I
kid who is playing with their uncle. Like when we were little kids, we'd be playing with someone. They'd give us a controller. It wasn't even plugged in, but we thought we were playing the character on the TV, and it was really them
hey
playing. And
worked
we were
every time.
happy. Yeah, we were happy
Worked
thinking it
every
was
time.
us.
Every time. Nate, I'm going back to you on this one. Okay, you're on the spot. I need a golden week. I need a golden sale Xbox recommendation.
I was looking at it. There's a
Uh-huh.
lot of good
All
games
right.
on. There's a lot of good games up
Okay.
there.
All right. I like it. What we got?
I only can do one.
Okay, you want to do more? I don't think people are gonna be mad at it. What do you have?
Okay,
What are the recommendations?
I'm gonna start with the 360 generation.
Okay.
A Capcom classic no one played. Asura's Wrath is $4.
Oh, I had that down too. I had that one down. Okay, that's a good. That's the backwards compatibility you got to take advantage of because that's the only way to play it now is through that Xbox 360 backwards compatibility. Really.
Now another great game.
Uh-huh.
It was released on the Xbox One, and naturally, backwards compatibility and such. And it's only $10. Is the Bayonetta Vanquish bundle?
Yeah, it's pretty good. $5 each. Like I feel like way too many people now probably sleep on Vanquish. That's a cool game.
Vanquish is a fantastic game. And the last one, despite there being a variety of others, I'm going to go with Ghost and Goblins Resurrections.
That's a good one too. That's a good one. Okay. Well, you took my Asura's Wrath. That was one I had locked up. But you know what? I will go with, Nate, because we talked about this recently. I'm gonna go with the Lost Planet trilogy for the price of a Big Mac, large Big Mac meal.
What's that, like $9?
You can get all 3 of them for like $11 or something.
That's a fantastic price.
Right? That's what I was saying. They're all backwards compatible. It's right there.
Wow.
Lost Planet. Get the whole all 3 of them. It's right there.
And you get the auto HDR. And I mean, Lost Planet had a lot of like the lighting because that's what you had to shoot on the enemies was the big bright orbs. So HDR would be very beneficial in a game like Lost Planet.
I haven't played that first one in a long time either.
It's a little stiff. It's a little more tank controlled than I think a lot of people remember.
Okay.
But
yeah, that's my thing. Is I eventually gotta go back to it. I just want to fire it up and see how the controls are. That was incredible when it came out. I don't know how well it holds up now, but it's a classic. It's a classic. People should check it out.
When Lost Planet 1 first came out, I remember I got the collector's edition came in the steel book for the 360, and you got like a 7-day free trial to Xbox Live because I had the multiplayer mode and such. Those visuals at the time were whoa.
Also, Balan Wonderworld is 85% off. That's $6.
Yeah, we don't need to acknowledge that.
Hey.
I thought you were supposed to give good recommendations.
Hey. Okay, Shenmue 1 and 2, $4.50. I mean, that's pretty good. 85% off for Shenmue 1 and 2. Come on.
Yeah, $2 each. You really can't go wrong. And it's the only way you can play. It's actually the only way you can play Shenmue on the Xbox family of systems because Shenmue 1 never came to the original Xbox despite Shenmue 2 being there, but we did get the Shenmue 1 movie as a pack in the Shenmue 2.
That's right. Yeah, Shenmue 1 and 2 though, at that price, that's hard to pass up that. That's pretty good.
I might actually buy
the sale's going on though. Oh, you're going to buy it?
I have it on the PlayStation already. I've been doing my platinum run through Shenmue 2. I have the Dreamcast version of Shenmue still, but you can never have too much Shenmue.
I guess that's true. The golden sale is going on through, I think, next week. I think it ends on the 6th. So you still have a week and a half really to go through everything, but there's a lot of stuff on sale. So definitely worth checking that out, going through it. Let me see. I do want to jump over, Nate, to the Fallout stuff. You still have not watched the Amazon Prime series. Sad. Very sad.
I don't have Amazon Prime.
Okay, you don't have Amazon Prime. Well, okay. It's very good. The series is good. I get why it's so popular and people are so excited about it online right now. It is very good. It takes about 3 episodes to get into, but once you do and it gets moving, it is awesome to watch. So I completely recommend it. But this has had a massive effect on the Fallout game franchise. So much so that Fallout 76 at one point had 1 million people log in one day and across the entire franchise. So like all the different Fallout games, I assume even maybe the first and second one they're counting, they've had 5 million people log in. Like that is absolutely nuts to see that. And now we have the update for Fallout 4 that's come out and taken the Xbox Series and the PS5 versions up to 60 frames per second. There's even a 40 FPS mode that they went ahead and added in for like this quality performance sort of mode, like kind of the in between there. People have enjoyed that. So there seems to be a massive resurgence for interest in Fallout again, and I think that's exciting stuff to see that. I feel like Nate's
Yeah, I
saying
mean,
stuff, a lot of stuff. Okay. Go
I
ahead,
mean, it's
Nate.
good for Fallout to really get this recognition because it was definitely a franchise that was very well received going, back from Fallout 3 and such, and the series has grown a lot since its inception. It's just kind of a shame that Bethesda didn't have anything more substantial to launch alongside the show, which, I mean, I guess you don't go into the show thinking it's going to bring these types of numbers, but it just shows that Fallout does have that type of appeal, and they can definitely utilize this as that gap leading up to the 2032 launch of Fallout 5 or whatever number we're up to with the franchise. And the fact that there's this much interest or people returning to it and you have the patch hit and such, it's a really good momentum boost for that particular franchise. And maybe it will allow Microsoft to evaluate more of their IP, be it from Bethesda, Activision, or even this Xbox Game Studios IP, and find good showrunners to adapt into TV series. Halo hasn't exactly been the biggest success, but they have a lot of IP that could do very well going to a smaller screen. So, something like Gears of War, I think that would be a fantastic thing to adapt.
Yeah, Gears would probably, I think that would work well, but they definitely need to take more and more advantage of reaching out to the mainstream through Amazon Prime, Netflix, Paramount, but do it better than what they did with Halo. Season 2 has been better. That season 1 hurt. That actually kind of hurt Halo, as bad as that is. So it kind of branching out that far can hurt the series. But man, Fallout really hit. They did a great job with that. They just need to be more involved with these shows, because you can tell that the Fallout series was very knowledgeable about just the franchise itself and the fun little bits and pieces they have there that would relate to the game and fun little callbacks. And now I'm looking forward to the second season after how they ended off this first season for Fallout. And I also was like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna download Fallout 4 and check out that update. I don't necessarily have time to get into Fallout like that, but I wanted to see the update right for Fallout 4. And it did push it up to 60 frames. The game still looks like a 20. I mean, it's from 2015. It's the older creation engine versus what they've done with Starfield. But still, it runs really well at 60 frames for the most part. I think there's like one part in the game, there's like a town that you go into that the frame rate would still tank in. But for the most part, combat, everything else felt way more fluid now. So the update is awesome to have, at least.
Yeah, it's a plus. I mean, it seems as though we're going to get a lot more shows based on gaming franchises, especially with the success of, Fallout now, The Last of Us and such. And we had a lot of animes over the year that had adapted very specific gaming IP. I mean, Nintendo back in the late 90s, early 2000s, you had a Kirby show, you had an F-Zero show.
There was
where
Kirby.
Captain Falcon, Falcon punched Black Knight into a supernova.
He did what he had to do.
I don't remember that in the games, but you also had the Shenmue anime that only lasted one season.
That's true. They've tried they've tried this kind of thing. We even had that Final Fantasy movie that again kind of hurt the franchise, Spirits Within. But
and I feel like it did have a Final Fantasy anime. What was it? It was Final Fantasy. It's actually not that good of a movie.
What?
Mostly incoherent.
That was a fun movie.
Because you like Final Fantasy VII and the characters.
I mean,
if you view the movie from a movie standpoint, it's kind of like, what is happening?
Oh, well, I'm not going to deny that. No, it's definitely for fan service and Cloud Sephiroth fighting in the air for minutes on end, and just swords going everywhere. And
you had the Max Payne movies with what was it, Mark Wahlberg?
Yeah,
the Hitman movies. They kept making Hitman movies. The
for
first one
some
was with
reason.
Timothy Oliphant. Yeah.
I like the idea of series versus movies now, because I feel like series, they just have more time to tell the overall story and flesh out characters and plot lines. I feel like every time they try to do these movies, they have to fast track so much of it. Like when they do the Zelda movie, how much time are they really going to be able to spend on any one piece of Link's journey? You know, stuff like that. And so I like the idea of these series where you have 8 to 10 episodes, 45 minutes to an hour long, and they can just take their time. So I hope that becomes more of the trend rather than the big box office Hollywood pushes. So we'll see. But hey,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why Castlevania was such a good success. It took its time to tell the story of a particular game and the lore and the sequences that they wanted to touch upon versus just, hey, we have to make Rondo of Blood into a 2-hour movie. And
right.
you're like, wow, this was rushed and this is terrible.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy
I just.
Unlimited. That was the anime.
Oh, okay. Final Fantasy Unlimited. Interesting. I did not know about that one. I'll have to look that up. Okay.
It wasn't that good.
Oh, well. What was so bad about it?
A lot.
Well,
I think the big thing that's happening in the last few years is that the individuals who are show running a lot of these projects grew up playing the games. They are our age, or maybe 5 years old.
That's a good point. So they're knowledgeable.
Not older people. Yeah, they're knowledgeable. They're not people who were making something like, the Max Payne movie or the Postal movie. What was U-Ball? Who just
what about the original Mario movie?
That's a cult classic.
Is it?
It's a guilty pleasure.
Is it?
I mean, what's the guy who keeps making? Who made Monster Hunter? What was his? Wes Anderson. He did the Resident Evil movies.
Oh man, how many I feel like there's a Resident Evil movie every other year. Is that just me? I feel like every time I turn around, there's a new Resident Evil movie coming out.
There were a lot of Resident Evil.
And half the time they're just bad, according to the internet. So I have no idea where to even go with that.
Yeah, they don't make any sense. Even when they try to make it, they did the Netflix series, right? And people said that was terrible too.
Yeah.
How hard can it be to adapt a property of pharmaceutical company makes bad virus, police go in to investigate, their chief is a double agent, zombies are there. Why is it so difficult to make good? It seems as though just take Resident Evil 1 and adapt it.
Well, that's it's very difficult.
I mean, you don't need the mutated shark. You can get rid of like the giant spider if you want to. But it feels as though you could tell a decent story with the material that's already there. Instead, we get those terrible movies that they put out in the early 2000s. I mean, they did give some great one-liners, though.
I have some good news, Nate. Good news. We actually had some movement in the Perfect Dark topic.
Yay.
It's small, but there's hope now. There's hope. Okay. And I do wonder if we're getting close to this thing being shown again. So what happened was there was a job listing that was spotted for the technical art director at the initiative. Okay. And specifically the initiative is looking for a technical art director. Join our team to work on Perfect Dark. Okay. So when you go into responsibilities, people notice that there is both performance and quality engine modes that were pointed out. This, of course, for quality out of Unreal for each platform, that sort of thing. So, of course, we know the initiative is partnered with Crystal Dynamics to help get Perfect Dark to the finish line. It was shown back in December 2020. So it's been a while for this game.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
And that trailer was, people were really excited about that trailer, right? To see Perfect Dark make its return. We still haven't necessarily seen Joanna like completely yet. We've seen like her running across a room with some concept art where she's shooting at some people. We saw, of course, the back of her where the camera was panning back and everything. But there was a lot of excitement for it just being Perfect Dark with the logo. A lot of nostalgia there.
Yeah, Data.
But that's it. Logo. It's been silent since. It's been very quiet around this. But performance mode. This is something that's come up with Microsoft. We talked about it with Hellblade 2. Talked about it with Redfall. Starfield. Seems like, at least with Perfect Dark, we could be getting performance mode. Them targeting 60 for this, maybe?
I'd definitely say it gives us hope for that. I wonder if the performance mode is one of the concessions that maybe the development team is finding itself due to the limitations of the Series S,
Mm.
where they don't want to really
Yeah,
compromise on their full vision of the Series X
Series
version
S.
and, come in with that Series S, which would be the more limited version of the game, and that allows them a little more flexibility.
Mm.
But I mean, it definitely gives us hope that we're going to have that 60 FPS option, 30 FPS as that secondary option. And it's definitely something that we have said that Microsoft should implement in more of their games. Like Redfall eventually got this 60 FPS patch several months after release, and maybe Hellblade 2 see something similar to that. It's hard to tell as these games get optimized. There's always further improvements after a game does release. But it's good that if they are approaching Perfect Dark with this as a forefront thought, that if they have those two options just on the onset, it would definitely quell a lot of those concerning conversations that would otherwise erupt when the news comes out if the game were to be 30 FPS and such. So by having those two options, you give the player the freedom to choose the way they want to play, which has been how Sony's approached the majority of their first party releases on the PlayStation 5 this generation.
Mm. I feel like this is a game that has to have a performance mode just because it is going to be a shooter. We don't know if it's third person or first person yet. I
Hmm?
kind of wonder if it's gonna be a mix between the two. The way they've shown it off, it really hasn't given us an indication necessarily. Perfect Dark, of course, being, as we know, a first person shooter, but we see Crystal Dynamics come in. We know their recent history of things like Tomb Raider, so they could try to shake it up with like a third person versus first person thing. But I do like the fact that we are at least seeing something mentioning a performance mode, because I feel like people have started to just get used to Microsoft not even really approaching that unless it's like the coalition with Gears of War. So I am
Hmm?
hopeful that Perfect Dark will not only have that, but I also hopeful that it's going to be shown soon. Like, they revealed this what feels like forever ago at the Game Awards. I think it's time to at
Hmm?
least get another look at it. Give us an indication as to what we're even gonna see with this thing, because
Right.
I would like to think it's coming out next year, like 2025. I mean, it's 5 years since its reveal. If it's not till holiday 2025, that seems kind of wild.
It's, I think if we are to see it this year, it would be in December at the Game Awards. If we are to
Yeah,
see it again
again,
this
Game
year,
Awards again, man. Yeah.
it's really going to depend on the state that the game is currently in and whether or not they have anything that would be meaningful in terms of deliverables. Because I think at this point, if you are to show Perfect Dark again, you can't show it as just another CG trailer. You have to give us a vision of what the gameplay is going to be like. You essentially have to do what you did last June with Fable. You have to give us a very coherent vision of what the game is going to be delivering in terms of direction and mix in some gameplay segments. Because if you just give us a CG trailer, you're just going to have a lot of conversation go around of what is happening with Perfect Dark. Should we be concerned with the state of Perfect Dark? And, as we sit here today, I don't think those are really unfair questions of what is going on with this game. What state is the game in? How far along in development is the game? Do they have a gameplay loop already set in stone? Do they have a fully realized vision of what they want to do with this game? Is it third person? Is it first person? Is it a hybrid like Indiana Jones? What are we getting from this? And they're going to have to answer all of that the next time they show the game. So if we are to see it, I think it's December. And I mean, right now, sitting here in April, I would say it's a coin toss if we see it in December. I think ideally Microsoft would love to show the game again, but they have to have something to show. If they don't have anything to show, you're better off not even touching it and allow something like Gears of War 6 to really be that holy shit moment in June and generate that excitement and then just lead us into the holiday with Avowed and Indiana Jones and such, and then come back in early 2025 with the Xbox Direct showcase that they do in January or February and detail what we have coming out in 2025, which we would get further details in just over a month in the June showcase. So titles like Fable and such. But I'd say at the absolute earliest, Perfect Dark would be coming out in late 2025, but I think it's definitely more along the lines of 2026 or later.
That's a fair point, actually. What you're making here. If we do, so if because they have those Xbox Directs, you're right. They can go, okay, we're gonna do DirectXbox, like their own little thing there, right? Their streaming developer direct. They can do that whenever they want, technically. So it is kind of that sense of, I guess if it's not ready, you can wait. But if they have Gears ready to roll and the Coalition's ready to show up big time, I don't want to say it would overshadow Perfect Dark, but people would come out of that talking about Gears. Absolutely. So it is kind of that sense of maybe we don't have to show up immediately with Perfect Dark if we have a big blockbuster like that. But if they don't have Gears, then it's like, okay, maybe Perfect Dark, because it just feels like it's been a minute. It really has. And I was excited when it got announced, and it felt like it was the initiative was rolling. And then we hear that they were losing people, and it was like, oh, great. Now Crystal Dynamics comes in. It's like, okay. But they're also working on Tomb Raider. So it's maybe it's also I want to see Perfect Dark, so there's a bit more confidence in place for it. That might also be it.
I think that's the big thing, is that this is a brand new studio. We don't know the level of their pedigree. We don't know what they're going to deliver here. And I'd say people had that same hesitation when it came to Fable. It was at a new studio, a studio that has done exceptionally well when it came to racing games, but had never tried their hand in an open world RPG style of game. So you had to see, what exactly are they doing with Fable? What is their vision? Are they going to deliver the humor and the tone that we have seen from the previous Fable games when Lionhead was behind them? And when we finally saw it in June, a lot of that concern was erased. You could see it and say, okay, they have the humor. We can see the direction that they're going in. It definitely feels like it's Fable. It's the Fable we grew up with and that we have played, just in a new, modern generation. With Perfect Dark, we don't know what Perfect Dark's going to be, because you could definitely make the argument that Perfect Dark is a lot different from Perfect Dark Zero, and that was the same development studio.
That's
So
true.
what are we going to see from the initiative? Are they
That's
going to
probably
take it
also it.
in are they going to take it in the same direction that Rare would have, or are we going to get more of a sci-fi spy direction where there's going to be a lot more gadgets, where basically we are a futuristic Bond as opposed to a first-person shooter with some cool gadgetry fighting aliens in the middle of outer space?
That's the thing, is I don't know what I mean, I know what Perfect Dark is from the Nintendo 64 and kind of from the 3 but like we all think of the N64 version, and I just want to know what is this new
Yeah.
take, because I think it's going to be a new take on Perfect Dark. How are they
Mhm.
going to navigate it? That's
Essentially, it's a
why I want to
reboot.
see it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
a
why I want to
reboot
see
of
it.
Perfect Dark. I
Yeah.
want to see the direction they take, because it could be very exciting. It could be the
Mhm.
complete rebirth of the franchise, or it's going to be Perfect Dark Zero all over again.
You know what else
Eh.
I went with that whole thing, Nate, is I would expect there to be a multiplayer element to it. And I just feel like every time I hear multiplayer, it's just always live service, live service, live service. But I picture Perfect
Mhm.
Dark as that arena shooter from back in the day. So I would like that too, is
Yeah.
them go, you know what? We're gonna have the single player. There's gonna be a multiplayer. It's not gonna be live service stuff. It's gonna be arena shooter, and that's it. I feel like they could do like you can pull that off still, I feel like.
You could definitely pull it off. Bigger arenas similar to what we played on the original.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
mean, even Perfect Dark Zero, the multiplayer was good.
Well, I mean, it wasn't bad. It never hit like even though the
No,
N64 one fell to like 10 frames a second sometimes when you had
but
four
it
different
was
screens going, right? It
but
was
it was
still fun.
legendary, because
Yeah, it was just
when you
fun.
played Perfect Dark on the N64, you would go to the map where you'd have the procs, you'd have remote mines, you have the Slayer, a remote controlled rocket launcher. You'd have the laptop gun. You'd set yourself up in a corner protected by the laptop gun with the procs in the other corner while you were actively hunting with the Slayer. And you had every weapon have that secondary mode. There were so many features that that game had, and it made it so exciting to play local multiplayer with friends. And if they could somehow bring that into a modern arena style multiplayer online setting, you could have one of the best multiplayer games of the generation. I mean, I'm picturing something like Rainbow Six Siege, but with crazy weapons and
Okay.
faster
Yeah, I
gameplay.
could see that. Yeah, I can see that. Nice. Huh. But that's what I mean. It doesn't have to be I just don't see it as having to be a live service stuff. They have that with some of the other things. Let's try a more built up arena shooter. Let's see how that works out. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, don't go the Call of Duty path. Don't do anything like that. Just embrace what made Perfect Dark. And that's exactly what Perfect Dark on N64 did when it came to the multiplayer. Actually, when you look at a lot of successful multiplayer games, it really took what the single player was and just converted it into a coherent multiplayer experience. The original Gears of War. The multiplayer was a mode they added on very late in development as just a means of like, let's give the game a little more replay value and something for people to do. And the multiplayer was fantastic. Then they tried to make multiplayer something with Gears of War 2, and they made some baffling decisions, like how you could fall over from a smoke grenade. It's kind of the Smash Brothers Brawl moment of tripping.
Well, hey, well, okay, so maybe at the Game Awards we'll see, but
I think that's the target. I think their hope is to show it again this year, as long as the
maybe not in a month and a half.
Well.
That might be the Gears show, is what you're saying. That might be the Gears show.
If Perfect Dark shows up in June, I think the show is a little too legendary in terms of potential.
Yeah, we can't have that too much fun.
You have to move something to you have to move something to December. And if we look at Microsoft's track record of how they approach December, Hellblade 2 kept showing up in December. They didn't really bring it in June when it was time to give a new update. And since Perfect Dark was a title that debuted at the Game Awards, I think the second showing would also be at the Game Awards as opposed to a June showcase.
Okay. That's hey, I'm hoping we see it sooner rather than later, but if we're looking towards Gears, I'm not gonna be mad about Gears either.
No, I cannot wait to see what Gears 6 is gonna do.
I do want to point this out, Nate. BlizzCon canceled 2024. They made the announcement they're skipping this year. They said it's coming back, or they're going to try to get it back maybe next year. BlizzCon's been through a lot recently over the last, like 4 years because of everything that happened with the pandemic. They were trying to do in person. They couldn't a few months ago, actually, because it was in November, I believe. They did the in-person event. And I guess going into this year, they're looking around, and I don't know if they don't have much to show for Blizzard or what the deal is, but they're just not going to be doing it this year. Which
I guess it could be a culmination of maybe they just don't have that much to show. Maybe with the acquisition, they're still just working out logistics of things and trying to figure out how they want to approach a BlizzCon. It could just also be global warming, and there's not going to be a blizzard. Any number of things. I don't think it's really anything that's too concerning, especially if they have already relayed the information that they would like to bring it back next year. So if next year doesn't happen, then I think a conversation could be had of what is the future for BlizzCon. But with a single year being canceled, I don't think it's any alarm.
Okay. I just wanted to bring that up. I'm gonna, if they cancel again, so there's 2 years in a row, then I'm gonna think, okay, this like it might be it for BlizzCon, but we'll see. Well, we'll see what they do. And I did want to also ask Nate. This is I think our last thing we're going to discuss very quickly as we then go into the after show where we'll be doing a Patreon hangout basically over on the Spawncast Network. I already have the link posted up over on the Patreon page. People can go check that one out there. You can join us here in a bit. What is our favorite Xbox Dash? It can be any variant. It can be any generation. What is the one that you think of and you go, that was like perfection when it comes to Microsoft, or at least the best they've done so far? What in your mind is the best one?
Well, there's really only one answer to this question, and it is the original Xbox 360 Blade system.
Really? You think it's the Blade system?
Absolutely. There's nothing better than the Blade system.
I feel like people look, the Blade system was cool looking. I feel like people look back on that and forget about the lack of functionality.
It was efficient. You knew exactly where you had to go for the features. It was well labeled. It was quick.
And do anything else then at the same time.
You only asked about the you only asked.
I'm asking that the functionality is part of this.
Bring up functionality as well.
Functionality is part of it. You're just going by aesthetics. See, you can make a really good looking OS. Like Windows Vista came out. People thought it looked incredible.
The chat is in favor of me.
And
Everyone's
it
going with
turned into
Blade.
Xbox Blades all over again when they're like, wait a minute, this thing isn't working.
I love the Blade system. I wish they would make
Really?
a
The
modern
Blades, huh?
Blade system.
I like the look of the Blade system because the Blade system very much looked like a video game OS. Like when I look at that, I'm like, yeah, it's a video game OS. That makes sense to me. I think the one that I like the most that they've done is and it's what the 360 runs on now. The final form of the Xbox 360 OS, but just on better hardware. And I think that's kind of like basically what the Xbox One started with, and they've worked away from, to where now they have it so that you're scrolling from top to bottom and then your icons kind of move left to right. I don't like that one as much. And they're still doing stuff where they show you a live background, but then they cover it up with a bunch of stuff. So it's I don't mind the idea of having screens that you go between. So with the Blade system, like you're saying, we had game, you had media, right? You had like all these little tabs that would change color.
It made a nice little swooshing sound.
That was nice. The sound effects were good. I'm not going to take that away from the Blade system. The sound effects were good. I like the idea of that, the organization, and the Xbox 360, then to the Xbox One, that dashboard kind of had that. It also had ads, which is really annoying, but it did have that to where, okay, here's like kind of the game tab, here's the multimedia, and yes, that did have TV, I know, but it was interesting. Remember, you jumped to that section, and then there was like your TV basically playing there because it was passed through your Xbox, and then you had the shop, like you go to the left and there's the marketplace. I didn't mind that organization, and it was faster with the Xbox One. It's slow on the 360. It's fast with the Xbox One.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if they kind of kept that and built on that as opposed to kind of going to what they are now necessarily, I feel like I would have liked that more. It didn't have much personality though. That is definitely a knock. It did not have the personality of Blade or NXE, where you had your avatar.
NXE, I'm looking at some of the pictures of NXE. That was a pretty good system too. You had your avatar standing there greeting you. And remember, you could customize your avatar and have like little companions. You could have like a stuffed animal, or you could have like the warthog on the screen and stuff. So it gave you that sense of it was your system. It had personality. You were greeted warmly versus the sterile, generic things that we have today. But I still go Blade system.
Still going Blade system.
It was so cool at the time. I mean, even the original Xbox had a decent enough little system there if you didn't have the disc in.
NXT, because it also introduced Doritos Crash or Crash Course and 1 versus 100. Hey, we need that 1 versus 100 back.
We do. We definitely need that game back. I can't believe they haven't put that on Game Pass. It's such an easy game. It would be such a huge announcement if they went into June and said 1 versus 100 is coming back, available later today. The game would crash. You'd have so many people playing. You'd have streamers playing the games on Twitch and everything. We're talking about this game, and there is a subsection of individuals listening who have no idea what we're talking about. They never experienced 1 versus 100.
That would be all. I feel like that, especially in the social media setting now, would probably get a bunch of clips and stuff posted up online constantly. Like, that seems like such a fun thing to have. It's now in like the digital era where everyone's just constantly communicating. That could be a really fun time.
Not even just the digital era, in the era of social media, a social game. Because if you also allowed it to be played on your mobile device.
Oh yeah. That's true.
Even cloud streaming on the TV. You could play 1 versus 100 on any screen that you could log into your Xbox account. Is that not the exact thing Microsoft has been preaching that they want to be able to deliver? 1 versus 100 would do exactly that.
I think that'd be awesome. I'm here for it. Bring back 1 versus 100. And you know what? I think that's that nostalgia. I think that's a great way to end the show tonight. Mostly because it's almost 11 and that's when we're going to be live for our Patreon the after show. But thanks. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. We will be back actually 2 weeks from now, which, by the way, we are coming up to where Microsoft will have their June event. So we're going to have an episode eventually. When was that? That's going to have to be pretty soon, where we do a predictions for it and we kind of go over what Microsoft is rumored to announce there, and then what we hope would be there. We'll do a whole show on that. I think it'll be a lot of fun. But thanks everyone for tuning in. Nate, is there anything you want to close out with here as we move over to our Patreon after show?
Fill the comment section below with love for the Xbox 360 Blade system.
That Blade system. Look, the Blade system looks good. Okay, I'm not gonna say it doesn't. It looks good. It looks good. The functionality not as good though. But thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to do it all over again. We'll see you then.